Convince me. And tell me every last
back when I was
detail.
in that barbershop quartet,
Some guy in California, his name is Redfoot.
oh, big fat guy. I mean, like orca fat. When I was picking beans in Guatemala, we used to make fresh coffee.
What lawyer verbal?
I am Mr. Kobayashi.
Kobayashi.
What lawyer
Convince
verbal?
me.
Like you, be strong to hold the powers of the sun.
I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Listen to Pavarotti.
Can I be your superhero?
Hello, welcome to The Revealing. I'm your host, Pavarotti, and I'm here to discuss the Idaho 4 case. And you may think I'm crazy in this episode. You may very well be right. But I'm trying to look at this thing with whole new eyes. Now, nobody's ever going to, ever going to convince me that the motive behind the Idaho 4 atrocity is not retaliation from the parents, because I have gone through their court records extensively, found exactly when they turned evidence 2 different times on the same group, and then correlated people that they turned in to being at the crime scene and all the things after that. So that'll never change. I mean, that is Occam's razor on another level. But the events surrounding the actual atrocity, those are the things that are the toughest to nail down. And I realize now, after all this time, and I've been alluding to this, I may have actually been just saying this, but I'm realizing that the reason that there's so many things that we've all contemplated so many times that just don't make sense, well, the only obvious conclusion, especially in light of new evidence, is it can't make sense because it didn't happen. It was lies. For example, in the PCA, it is a clear statement, and I went over this in the video last night. Some of you probably seen it that watched it. That was a long video. I bet a lot of people, bailed out before I even got to this point. But when the PCA says that the vehicle turns around at Linda Lane, and then as it's heading back towards King and Queen Road, it attempts to park in the King Road residence, or it fails to park or tries to turn around in the street, and then it goes down and makes the 3-point turn at King and Queen Road. I have literally, I don't know how many hours that I have spent researching, contemplating, just trying to figure out how would they even know that that vehicle turned around, because there's no cameras there that we know of. I mean, obviously a lot of people are saying there was cameras across the street, but those have never come to fruition to anywhere as far as I know. So, I mean, we've gone over it. Many people have gone over it, argued about it. I mean, how did they even know that that vehicle turned around? Then we get the FBI report, and it says straight up the vehicle never did any of that. It was just a lie. And that was a stupid lie. Well, I think you would agree. That was just a stupid lie. It was in there just to make it look more connected to the crime. So the reason that I'm beginning to believe that these things that we can never just figure out, that doesn't make any sense. I mean, for example, I've listened to my man Unfiltered Lucky talk about the roommates and the fact that, you know, it didn't make, I mean, you watch half of his videos where he talks about the roommates, he probably makes the statement 500 times. So, you know, it just doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense to me. You know, it just doesn't make any sense. I agree. And it doesn't make any sense because those roommates were not there. And I'll give you even more proof that those roommates are not there or were not there. Listen to this statement. I want you to listen to it really close, because this was right after the atrocity, before all of the manipulation really started.
Is anyone acting differently since the murders? I mean, is there anyone that you have a weird feeling about?
few of the names that have been circulating around, I think it's hard not to kind of, dig into this. And I don't know how much of that is just because we have so little information from law enforcement and how much of it really is, a sister or a father's intuition.
Can you elaborate at all? I don't know. You don't have to give a name, but I mean, is it someone that she knew, or?
I have something to say about that. I just feel like there's been a couple individuals that were cleared very fast. That may not, maybe he shouldn't have been. And yeah.
She had the strong alibi.
Just really fast.
If you can dismiss.
An hour later, and we're like, what? And I don't know. I don't know anything about those individuals. I just know they were people that, definitely should have been looked at, and yeah.
I don't know what would prevent you from sharing somebody's alibi.
Now, did you catch what G said right there? I want you to listen real close one more time at exactly what he said as Ms. G brought up the roommates.
And yeah.
She had the strong alibi.
Just really fast. And yeah.
She had the strong alibi.
Just really fast. And yeah.
She had the strong alibi.
Just really fast.
I don't know what would prevent you from sharing somebody's alibi. I don't know what would prevent you from sharing somebody's alibi.
Now, why, if the roommates were both in the house during the atrocity, why would they have a strong alibi? Why would they even need an alibi? They didn't have an alibi. They were in the house by themselves, right? You see, this thing has been one lie after another since the very beginning. So it makes me start to really wonder when I start to see things develop that don't make any sense, knowing what I know. So I have to sit back and try to clear my mind from what I know and look at it with new eyes and see what the new eyes tell me. Because when I look at it from that perspective, then certain things become not just plausible, but likely. And I'm going to show you that here in a minute. And what I'm alluding to is the fact that I believe that it's possible that some of the victims were unalived with a knife, but I believe it's possible that some of them were unalived with a gun.
I've been told that there were differences in the way that the victims were killed.
Their means of death don't match. They don't match.
That's right. And we may have been lied to since the very beginning. I don't say that willy-nilly, okay? I'm going to show you why I'm even suggesting that in this video. And I'll let you decide for yourself whether you feel like it's a possibility or not. But let's take a look at a new court doc that the defense has filed with an expert who is an expert in crime scene reconstruction. And I've been waiting on this one. And there is some very interesting things written in his statement. And when you dig into his expertise, there's some very interesting things that he is really, really good at and has been doing for a long time. Hold on to your hats, folks. Okay, so we've got a new filing from the defense, and it's a notice of filing declaration in support of defendant's objection to the state's motion in limine as it relates to the admissibility of the demonstrative exhibit and memorandum in support. Remember, this is the Barbie dollhouse that the FBI wants to wheel out on a table and show the jury this little Barbie dollhouse that's not built to scale and pretty much mislead the jury. So Bryan Kohberger, through his attorney of record, files the accompanying declaration of Matthew Nodel in support of their objection to the state's motion in limine. And let's look at the declaration of Matthew Nodel. I, Matthew Nodel, swear under penalties of perjury that the information in this declaration is true and correct to the best of my knowledge. My name is Matthew Nodel. I am a forensic scientist with degrees in microbiology, medical technology, and forensic science. Certifications in firearms, tool marks, gunshot residue, and laser scanning. And all of these certifications that Mr. Nodel has is strictly firearms. Firearms, tool marks are for firearms, gunshot residue obviously for firearms, even the laser scanning is for firearms. My total experience includes over 38 years working exclusively in forensic science as outlined in the attached CV, curricula vitae. But even laser scanning is related to firearm science. So what is Matthew Nodel an expert in as it relates to the crime scene?
Pretty quickly after starting with the State Patrol, I became a member of the crime scene response team as basically as a student mentor. I was mentored by the senior members of the organization. My career actually started a few years prior to that, where I was working in a private laboratory in forensic toxicology. In the toxicology lab, we didn't do a lot of reconstruction, and we certainly were not doing shooting incident reconstruction. But I got out of that job and right into the Washington State Patrol, where I was doing chemistry and trace evidence analysis. And an opportunity came up with the crime scene response unit, and I took that responsibility on as well, and have been in that continuously ever since. So I'm about 30 years into the field of studying crime scenes and primarily shooting reconstruction and how to reconstruct events that have involved the discharge of a firearm. I had been with the Washington State Patrol for 15 years, and working as a private consultant was something that was always interesting to me, being able to run my own business and make my own decisions. So the time seemed right when I left the State Patrol to go forward and start out on my own. I'd gained tremendous experience through my time at the Washington State Patrol, so that served me very well. Ultimately, it was a decision where I was glad to begin to run my own show and sample the water outside of the government business. Government comes with a lot of baggage, of course, so it was nice to be independent and be able to call my own shots, work my own cases, and make the decisions for myself. The thing to understand about shooting incident reconstruction, it's often confused with recreation. And recreation would be a process whereby you might make a movie to try to show how something occurred. Reconstruction, in my view of thinking about it, is using the science of the physical evidence to test elements of a scene. Ultimately, you need to know what's being said about a scene, and you can use the physical evidence to then test those statements. So if a person, for example, says, "I was standing at the doorway when I shot into the room," we might be able to reconstruct the path of that bullet and see, does it in fact point back, supporting the witness statement or the shooter statement, or is the angle incorrect and the shooter is deceiving us somehow? So reconstruction is the act of using physical evidence in order to test elements of a scene. Then crime scene processing, which is where you gather that data for reconstruction. The typical case that I get involved with starts with a paper trail. Now as a private consultant, I no longer am quote unquote under the tape. That is, I'm not getting invited into the primary scene when maybe a victim is still on the ground and we are still gathering evidence.
Right.
As a private consultant, most of that work has already been completed. So it starts by reviewing the available data. And sometimes that leads to the position where I want to see the actual physical items that we have. And one of the things that's interesting about reconstruction is an attorney who I may work for may have a crime laboratory report that says, hey, this gun fired this bullet. And I'm not so much interested in the gun that fired the bullet. I'm interested in what does that bullet look like? Did it ricochet off of a surface, or did it go directly into its target? Did it collect fibers or tissue or hair or something along the way? So the reconstruction is beyond just simply counting lands and grooves and microscopic comparison. It takes in the whole path of that bullet and how that bullet performed in a scene.
Okay.
Not really looking at anything in the bloodstain pattern area. The reason I like to maintain my bloodstain pattern expertise is because on every time people are shot, there's almost always blood. I say almost always because I have had situations where people have so much layers of heavy clothing that you don't actually see bleeding out in the field. But areas within, I like to look at areas that we have been making claims about for a long time, but really have never backfilled the science to them. Recently, I did some research on. I was challenged by an attorney in a deposition at one time, and I was challenged that the position of cartridge cases on the ground in a shooting scene were irrelevant because a car had driven through that scene, and the car would scatter these cartridge cases everywhere. Well, that sounds right, but I realized nobody had ever tested that. So I began a series of implementing a series of tests with my regional forensic association called the Northwest Association of Forensic Scientists. And we began putting cartridge cases in the pavement and running over them with the tires of a car, of a fast moving vehicle. And what we found was very compelling. In about 93% of the times, the trials that we did, the cartridge cases moved 6 inches or less from their original position. So what we found out from that was that just simply driving through a scene does not necessarily wreck the distribution of fired cartridge cases. The video there, some of the video we shot, we did a number of trials with a number of different cartridge cases, different calibers, different designs. And we found that they stay put. They stay put pretty well. The interesting things about shooting reconstruction is it's very intuitive, and everyone understands that when you fire a gun, the bullet goes straight down the barrel and straight on, over a short distance at least, straight on to whatever it hits. Looking again at ejection patterns, I recently did some research with some people down in Oregon looking at documenting ejection patterns using 3D laser scanning. And so traditionally, when we evaluate where a gun kicks out its fired cartridge cases, we would set up an XY coordinate system with tape measures and physically measure how many inches over and how many inches back each cartridge case was. Looking at documenting ejection patterns using 3D laser scanning. But with the 3D scanner, I can shoot a pattern, let the cartridge cases land, and simply scan their position, capturing all of the locations in one swoop using 3D laser scanning. I can then take that 3D data, rather than me having to plot it on a piece of graph paper, I can now drop that 3D environment right into my crime scene if I wish. So if I have a distribution of cartridge cases in a parking lot, like in the case I described earlier, I can test the performance of a firearm clinically in a lab setting at a gun range, scan that data, and now using all digital 3D scanning, drop that into my scene.
So that was the defense's new forensic crime scene specialist, Matthew Nodel. And I find it particularly interesting that his main area of expertise has to do with firearms. Can't find anything where his expertise has to do with knives. So, but it's very detailed what he does with firearms. And I thought the fact that he kept bringing up the laser scanning for being able to determine things related to shell cartridge ejections and everything else was very interesting. And I think it's very telling as I read the rest of his declaration to you. Keep in mind what we just discussed as it relates to the laser scans. I've been retained as a consultant by the defense in Mr. Kohberger's case. One of my key roles in the case is to assist the defense team in investigating and reconstructing the scene. During the course of my work, I have had the opportunity to observe the scene. I conducted a 3D scan of the scene, at the first opportunity provided to the defense. The purpose of the 3D scanning a scene is to understand and depict the way a scene appeared and be able to troubleshoot that scene in a to-scale manner. It is imperative to acquire the scans appropriately and register, stitch together the scans accurately to ensure they meet evidentiary standards for further troubleshooting of the events. I am aware the state has conducted at least one set of scans that depicts only the 2 rooms with the deceased in situ acquired in the first hours of the investigation, and a report that indicated a second set of 3D scans was acquired on or around November 1st, 2023. But that data had not been produced until recently, March 14th, 2025. Wow. Prior to March 14th, 2025, I've been provided with only the early scan data that depicts the 2 rooms in the house. Recently, I was made aware that the state had intended to use the previously unproduced data from the second set of 3D scans to build a replica model of the residence and associated topography for trial. I have only recently been provided with scan data and have not seen the final product, model, or other data the builders of the model intend to rely upon. I've not been provided with the details as to how the data from the 3D scans will be incorporated into a demonstrative model or how the model may be used in presentation to the jury. I have concerns about any replica utilized for trial that has not been verified as to scale. Given the unique layout of the house, any misrepresentation of where a wall is or where a door was located or what the actual line of sight was will be misleading and could cause a jury to place significance on something that's not accurate. Utilizing a replica that is not to scale will invite speculation and confuse the jury. See, line of sight, that's something that you would coincide with a firearm. In addition, I've been informed that the model will not have any furniture, original materials, or other objects that take up space in the normal layout of the residence. The absence of these features can influence the appearance of spatial relationships as they actually existed and were captured in original photos and video. That would affect things in your laser scan as it relates to cartridge ejections. And it says, finally, on March 14th, 2025, I was provided with the data from which the model will be built. This data includes over 100 individual 3D scans that have been stitched together and include not only the residence, but the topography of the surrounding landscape. Assessing this data will take considerable time, and then examining the finished product and verifying scale, dimension, and completeness will take additional time on top of that. By way of reference, it will take at least a full day, if not more, just to download the data from the server. And then he goes on to talk about how long it would take him to go through that stuff. So the judge, if he wants to keep this train on its tracks, running on its schedule, will need to grant the defense's motion in limine to say no to the Barbie dollhouse on wheels. So that would be a really easy remedy to that situation. Just Hippler, just say no. But everything I see in this points towards this guy's expertise, and his expertise is firearm related. Interesting. So it gets me to thinking, all the things that never made sense to us in this case. Most of them are turning out to be just flat out lies and fabrication. So it makes me really start to contemplate those things that just never made sense to us. And the more I contemplate it and start to realize that it was just a lie and start looking at it for what it is, then other things start to become much more probable than even possible. But then it leads me to my next thought, which is, I understand there's a gag order in this case, but if things were lied about in the beginning on this type of scale, for example, that the roommates were not even in the house, some of the victims may have actually been unalived with a firearm, then it makes me wonder, because this isn't information that the defense wouldn't be aware of. I mean, as it relates to one of them being unalived or multiple of them being unalived with a firearm rather than a knife. This would be something that they would be absolutely aware of. So I understand there's a gag order, but I mean, there has to be some kind of clause that if law enforcement blatantly lies about facts in your client's case, surely you have the right to reveal the truth as it relates to those types of facts. I mean, it's not like it's a you scratch my back and I'll scratch your type of thing, because the defense doesn't get any slack on anything. So, I mean, it just really makes me wonder. If this is the case, Ann Taylor, and this is how you're trying to get this information out there because it's the only way you can, then keep on keeping on, keep on letting little things slip, because we will figure them out. And of course, the more information you can let slip, the more we can not only figure it out, but we can convince people that, you know, are, have Gilter blocks and POV blocks that, you know, they need to open their eyes to the possibilities as well. But I just can't help but go back and think about, you know, my guy Unfiltered Lucky, because when he makes those statements, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, he's really good at pointing out things that really don't make sense. And it turns out a lot of these things that really don't make sense because I believe we've been lied to from the beginning. What do you think, man?
It would just seem odd to me that this attacker would reach their target and accomplish their goal, take this target's life, and then go after two additional victims who were uninvolved in the reason that the attacker was there in the first place. That just doesn't make sense.
Right. Please like and subscribe to the channel. Post your comments, thoughts, your criticisms. Thank you so much for all of those wonderful comments. I do read every one. I can't call out one or two because then I'll leave, 700 not called out. So, but I'll do it anyway. Cherokee, I see all of your comments, all your wonderful thoughts, as well as the rest of y'all's. And Michael Clayton, the opening was for you, man. Pavarotti is out.
Fly away. It's the first time of today.